Please give a warm Georgia Tech welcome to our esteemed guest, Dr. Hardman.
Thanks so much. Can you guys hear me all right? Good. All right. I'm trying to figure out who's in our audience. By a show of hands, how many of you guys are undergrads? About half of you. How many of you guys are graduate students? Wow, that's a lot of graduate students. And then how many of you guys are other? What's other?
Community member.
Okay, cool. Faculty. See Dory back there. Good to know. Next question I have is, why are you guys here? Anybody? Nobody knows why they're here?
Because we want to learn about you and Wildar. So excited.
So this may be more of a choose your own adventure talk, because I'm happy to talk about anything. The idea is multidisciplinary solutions to our greatest challenges. But often they're the greatest challenges we face in the world today, but it's also the greatest challenges we face individually. How many people know what they want to do for the rest of their lives? One? Oh, that's good. She already has a job, I think. Exactly. How many people think that they'll be specialists as your career blossoms? 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe. How many people think they'll be generalist? About 5 too. What's the rest of you guys going to do? Well, it's not a bad answer. How many people think they'll be both somewhere in between a specialist and a generalist? Cool answer. All right, well, we can talk about any number of things, and we only have an hour, and if this gets really boring, I have tons of videos that we can just put on, and we can just watch in silence, which is possible too. But Wildork's a really cool journey with lots of lessons learned, lots of challenges, lots of topics that we can talk about in conservation and the multidisciplinary approach that we're taking to it. But given that I am a professional career hopper, I'm also happy to dive in on that front and sort of my own personal journey. And so I will let you dictate that based on the questions you ask me as we go through. So we'll first talk about my professional journey, and then we will get to Wildork stuff. So here's 2 quotes. My personal mantra. There's no limit to what a man can do or where she or he can go if she or he doesn't mind who gets the credit. And when I compare the things I've lost with the things I've gained and the things I've missed with what I might have attained, there's little room left for pride. Does anybody know who Mr. Anonymous is? It's one person who's got inside knowledge. How many people have heard of Coca-Cola? How many people have heard of Robert Woodruff? How many people knew that he was Mr. Anonymous in Atlanta? How many people know how much he gave to Atlanta over the years? Tons. So the reason the CDC is here, Emory University, a lot of the tech, he supported Martin Luther King, among other business leaders in the community. But he did it all anonymously, and these are 2 quotes that he lived by, that I live by as well. My journey starts as I'm part of the No Excuse Club, which I just found out what the No Excuse Club was a couple months ago, really a year ago. And the No Excuse Club is someone who has no excuses in life, period, the end. And so in other words, I'm a white Caucasian male born into a, I'll just say, respected upper middle class family. Family infrastructure was intact. I had really good role models and good family values. Spoiled with opportunity. My parents did a great job of not spoiling me and my siblings materially, but they spoiled us with opportunity. And so it was interesting. I'm involved in the foundation community here in town, and we had a session on early childhood learning, and you start looking at, disadvantages that certain people go through life with, and it starts literally at the age of a month old, and negative influences and how they lead to other issues later on in life. And every single thing that happens is a foundation that is either going to be solid or not, and it's a matter sometimes of just luck. But I lucked out. I got everything I needed, and so one of my now mentors mentioned the No Excuse Club, being like, you have no excuses at all. And I think that's interesting perspective to have when you look at whoever is talking, where their drive comes from and where their motivation comes from. So I was born to be successful. I had all the opportunities I needed. That said, what drives me is not necessarily success as one would typically find it, a good paying job, a good family infrastructure. I have that. It's more about how do I give back to others? How do I lead? How do I follow my role models, who were my family members? So my grandfather ran the Woodruff Foundation for many, many years, which is why those two quotes are, important to me, and he lived by that. And then my dad ran the Carter Center for 25 years here in town, and I learned a lot through his work in the Carter Center. But through both experience, my mom's a community volunteer, and my dad's side of the family was involved in community and government as well. And so from the early age, it sort of was inbred in me that public service is what we do. And I sort of grew up with the mindset that making money wasn't what drove me, but it was how do you give back, how do you be impactful, how do you take advantage of the opportunities I've been given to make a difference. My parents made the interesting decision. I grew up in Buckhead. I could have gone to private school. They sent me and my siblings to public school, which was one of the, I think, formative decisions in who I've become and the values that I hold. If you know about the Atlanta public school system, while it's integrated, it's not truly integrated. Even in Buckhead, North Atlanta, when I went through it in the 90s, was about 15% white. And it was a wonderful perspective for me where you're not in the majority, even though you're in a position where you are in the community majority, just to learn to make friends, to understand things from the other side, and then really be able to adapt. Similarly, I went to Spoiled with Opportunity. We spent a year in France when I was in 6th grade. My parents threw me in the local French school there without speaking a word of French. And, through that, I had to fend for myself, learn how to do it, play sports, bond, make friends, learn French. But it gave me sort of this confidence in being able to adapt and understand others and just being thrown in a completely different culture. And back then, in the early 90s, it was very different than it is now. We didn't have the internet. You didn't have this massive culture integration and interconnectedness that we did now. So it was very, very big culture difference. So my professional mantra, how many people have heard this? It's not the most intellectual of the species that survives. It is not the strongest that survives, but the species that survives is the one that is able to adapt to and to adjust best to the changing environment in which it finds itself. So I think as you're young, the theme of adapting is the most important theme, particularly for all of you generalists out there, which is basically all of you but 5 wanting to do. The future of work is changing fast. The world is increasingly interconnected. Unless we break down the silos in which we operate, we are not going to be able to affect change. And so being able to adapt is truly what's important. So this is my career in a bullet point list. It started out with me wanting to be a magician. How many people like magic? Could I get a volunteer? Oh, man. All right. This is the first time I've ever done this trick. So here's the thing. I tried it out, being a magician, and I wasn't good at it. And I kept trying. I just wasn't good at it. But one of the qualities of being a good leader is being vulnerable. And that's how you build trust. And trust is one of the themes I'm going to talk about a lot. Trust is the most important thing in my mind in your professional career or in your personal relationships. But being vulnerable is there. So I'm going to show you potentially how I fail in front of all of you. I'm quite nervous about this, but we will see. Come on up. So I have a deck of cards here. All right. Let me remember how this trick goes. All right. I want you to tell me when to stop and put your hand on one of the cards. All right, pull it out. Don't show me.
What if I want the other one?
You got to take that one. Your hand's on it. So this is going to be a mind reading opportunity. I guess you can put it back in wherever you want. All right. Now I'm going to put it in my magic box, which I opened for the first time in 20 years today. I'm going to close it up. And now I'm going to think about this. I think you had the 5 of diamonds. Don't tell me what you got. Is it 5 of diamonds? Yes or no?
You said don't tell you.
Well, is it yes or no? Don't tell me the number. Is it a 5 of diamonds, yes or no? Just say yes or no. It's not. Really? Well, I failed. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to keep guessing. I think I'm going to get it. Write down what it was. Don't let anybody see.
They already know.
How do they know? You showed it to them?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. Everybody knows what it is. All right. So I failed at being a magician. So growing up, I've always had a hard time figuring out what it is I wanted to do. And I always excelled at many things. I was just able to cope and do a decent job. It was interesting. My mom actually, when I graduated from high school, put me in a one of these personality tests. How many people have done a personality test? How many people have done 2 different kinds of personality tests? Wow. How many people have done like 3 or 4 personalities? This is awesome. Well, when I was graduating from high school, I thought this was ludicrous and the dumbest thing she could ever do to make me wake up at 7 o'clock on a morning during a summer day. And I went in there, and it was a full day of tests, and it tested everything, aptitudes or whatever, and I didn't know why she was making me do it. She just thought it would be a good thing to do. And the results were great and also really, really bad. They were great because I did pretty well across the board, very well, in fact. The problem was that I did equally well across the board, and which is rare. And it's rare for someone to be equally well across the board, whether it's high or low. But when meeting the advisor on this, at that point, it wasn't just automated like DISC tests and others that you guys are familiar with. You had to sit down with them and go through the consultation. And basically, she said to me, or with my mom in the room, that's great, but this is actually going to be a serious challenge because you are going to be talented enough across the board to do whatever you want, essentially, if you want to do it. But it's not going to drive you in one way, and a lot of people find their passions based on what they're good at. And so based on how overly involved in things I already was, they said it was going to be really hard for you to find one career that you enjoyed. And the other interesting thing is I ranked really, really low on one thing. Guess what it was? Public speaking. Yeah, you're right, still low on that.
Hand dexterity coordination?
Was it? Nope, I was a drummer, so I was high on that. Motivation. It was interesting. I didn't want to be there, and I didn't think about this till much, much later, but it's where I get my motivation from. And when I go back to my values, and I've been looking at this in my career journey, my motivation actually doesn't come from within. It comes from with others and other impact that I get. But my motivation was almost like rock bottom. And they tested it by how long you squeeze the thing, and so I was just like, that's just silly. But there's something to it. In any event, here are all the careers I've had and the lessons I've learned. During college, I went into broadcasting at CNN. There, I learned about egos. For the first time, I saw in a professional setting the egos that just drive that entire room being front and center, and I was shocked by it, actually. After that, I became a teacher. How many people have taught before? What did you guys think? Thumbs down and thumbs up in the back. I love it. No, that's exactly right. It's thumbs down and thumbs up. It's the hardest thing I'll ever be able to do, but if you get it right, it's by far the most rewarding. And I think from a leadership standpoint, you learn more about yourself in teaching. And in my case, I was teaching middle school students that were bilingual, in English, and they actually were highly privileged, so which is a whole other challenge. But it was hard, and you have to manage the classroom on a day-to-day basis. And similarly, every single day you have to adapt. You got to come up with new lesson plans, new things to keep them engaged, just to keep their attention span, much less figure out how you are going to learn the material well enough, which everyone knows, but teaching it is very different from knowing it at what level you're doing. Learned a lot from teaching. Then I went into banking, marketing, and financial services. Went into law. What I learned from banking is work hard and you'll be noticed. I went in as an intern. It was a management training program of sorts that they created before I was going to law school. They basically put me in a low-level marketing assignment because they didn't know where else to put me. And I just kept my head down and did it for about 6 months. And you started producing results, you're proactive, and next thing you know, I got more assignments, and then other people were fighting for my time, and then all of a sudden I was like a consulting company reporting up to the CEO for financial management services about what their strategy should be, because I had the benefit of rotating around all the different groups and had information that none of them actually had of what was going on in the day-to-day. And so I say that early on in your career you should focus on working hard and learning as much as you possibly can and being proactive to get things done, and then opportunities will arise. What was interesting is my grandfather, who was such a role model for me, when I graduated from college, set me down and asked what I was going to do with my life. And he had never asked a question like that before. He was one of these people that anything I did was fine. I was shocked, and I said, well, I'm going to go down to school in the Dominican Republic and teach school for a year. He said, that's wonderful, that's wonderful. Well, what are you going to do after that? And I said, I don't know. Come back, get a consulting job or a banking job like everybody else. And he was like, that's great, that's great. What are you going to do after that? And I was shocked and a little dismayed. Why was this aggressive questioning coming at this time in my life when I didn't know anything? And he saw it, and he then said, I think you should go to law school, which shocked me even more and bummed me out because, I don't know about you guys, I had a negative perception of being a lawyer at that time. And he said, and he saw my sort of shock that he had said this, and he then told me, listen, I think you could do whatever you wanted, and if you had said you wanted to be a doctor or an architect or something that required a deep, deep specialty, I think you should go do it. You'd be great at it. That's fine. But I've seen you grow up. I've seen how many interests you have. I don't think that very specialized approach is really going to be right for you. I think you should go to law school. And it's not necessarily to practice law. He just said, I think it's the richest educational experience you can get that will apply to everything else you do the rest of your life. And he had gone to law school, but never practiced law. And he told me that, and it was, he died a month later. And so once that happened, I was like, all right, I'm going to law school. I got the one piece of advice from my grandfather. He knows what he's talking about. He wouldn't have given it unless he meant it. And I did, and he was exactly right. So I went to law school for a couple years and practiced law for several years. And working at a law firm, I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. How many people have thought about getting a law degree? Wow. How many people are going to get a law degree? Nobody. All right. I loved it, but at the same time, I always knew I was going to leave. And so it was a wonderful professional experience for me. I learned a lot about just being professional, responding in time, service-oriented, being punctual, writing and speaking clearly, even though I keep decreasing in my abilities over time. And so it was great, but I knew I didn't want to focus on law. I wanted more of the business side of things, and then ended up going to business school, where I was at INSEAD, and business school was a wonderful experience, but afterwards I came back, worked at a venture capital fund, software company, where I had all kinds of learnings, moved up to the holding company that owned several businesses, and then currently advisory service and investment company, as well as a multi-layered conservation organization. There are all kinds of learnings, throughout these experiences, and I'm happy to share any. Let's pick one. What's most interesting to you guys? Saying no to opportunity. All right, so the software company I was at, well, first let me say, how many people have heard of impact investing? 6 people have heard of impact investing. All right, well, someone share, what is impact investing?
Investing in like companies for sustainable energy or basically society-friendly causes.
Yep, so you're making an investment, so you're expecting some sort of return for a good social cause. Anybody else have a different definition? That's good. The new definition is, these triple bottom line approaches, or double bottom line, doing good and doing well at the same time. And so it's making an investment with the expectation of a financial return with the intention of having some specific social impact, however defined, is the definition. So the venture capital firm I ran was actually an impact investing group called First Light Ventures, affiliated with Gray Ghost Ventures here in town. The software company, I left that to get more operational experience. I loved investing. We can talk. How many people are interested in investing generally? A handful. Well, I'm happy to talk about that or talk about it afterwards, since not as many of you are. But software company was a data management solution software company, and I didn't have a ton of experience in that. But where I did come in, I had to quickly learn how to manage a software development team. How many people are software developers or engineers? You guys have way more experience than I have ever had in this, and I had to manage a team to do it, which was really, 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 really tough. Where it goes saying no to opportunity is, as you guys know, software development is hard. We're a relatively big company. We had multiple products. We had legacy products with old clients. And one of the challenges was seeing all this opportunity and then being able to say no to some of the opportunity just because we didn't have the bandwidth to meet it, and focusing on the highest priorities that you possibly can. So that's to say there's multidisciplinary learnings across the board where you can learn about these things to strategically make a good decision, even though you might not have the expertise within software that you might need. Happy to go into more learnings, share what's most interesting to you guys. Anything?
What are the world's toughest challenges that were referenced in the beginning?
The world's toughest challenges. So there's 2. What do you think the world's toughest challenge is?
I was going to guess one would be climate change or climate change related.
Climate change and the environment. Yep. And that's
Maybe social restructuring in the future, like what we consider life to be about, like having to think it's working in the future, everything's being automated more and more, so you may not consider that way. I consider life to be about work.
I think it is. You think about livelihoods. Where do we get income? Where do we get jobs? You think about the world increasing to 9 billion people by 2050 or 2100, one of those. Who's going to do the work, right? And where are people going to get income? And what are they going to use to buy food and get resources? I'd be scared about that, for sure. So I'll give an example, since you guys aren't as familiar with impact investing, around multidisciplinary approaches. I'm going to use Atlanta as an example. How many of you are from Atlanta? A good many. How many people feel they're up to date with where Georgia is as a state? Okay, so let's ask, where do you think Georgia ranks as a state in terms of education? Down, pretty low, right? Raise your hand if you think it's 40th or lower. You are correct. We are pretty low as far as education goes. Where do you guys think we rank as far as percentages of people living in poverty and income equality? Pretty bad relative to the others. That's also one of the very last states. Where do you think we rank as far as healthcare access goes? How many people think we're top 10, top 20, top 30, bottom 40? Yeah. We'll be positive, top 50. No, you're right. Where do you think Georgia ranks as an economy? What's our GDP? You think we're better than top 50, only top 40? Raise your hand. Or are we bottom 30?
What is it out of, like, all states?
All states. We're actually 39th. We have the 39th GDP in the world. It's crazy, huh? We have the 5th best GDP in the states and the fastest growing GDP. Where do you think Georgia ranks as far as philanthropic activity? Philanthropic activity. Giving, donations, like supporting nonprofits and causes. Bottom, right? Do you think we're at bottom? Everybody, raise your hand if you think we're in the bottom 40. Bottom 30? Bottom 20? So we're actually really good. We're number 2. We give more money per capita than every single one except for one state. So let me ask you this. We are at the very, very bottom in terms of where we sit for our social problems, education, healthcare access, poverty, etc. Yet our economy is booming. We have tons and tons of money. And we are one of the most philanthropic states per capita out there. What do we do about our challenges? We're already giving money to nonprofits to address them. We have tons of money in tax revenue at the state level, yet we're still really bad.
Is that money, when you say philanthropic, that's paid to Georgia nonprofits, or is that just, so is the money all staying in Georgia, or does that just mean Georgia citizens are giving votes, so some of that money is going out of the state?
Good question, and I don't know the answer. Probably some of it is. They would measure it based on individuals, not foundations. We have a pretty robust foundation community in Georgia, but this is based on individuals giving to social causes. And so most of it, you would assume, is staying local. So the answer in my mind is we have to figure out how to innovate, adapt, come up with better ways and more efficient ways to address our challenges. How do we get affordable housing met? How do we get better education? How do we get better healthcare access? And the answer in my mind is you have to link the capital markets to these social problems. You have to have businesses that are not only making money, but addressing social challenges at the same time. And that's about as real of an example of impact investing where we get. What's interesting, guess how many millennials now say that they want to invest with purpose? Meaning invest in companies, but do it with a specific purpose in mind. 30%? 80%? That's about right. 85% of millennials say they want to invest their money with purpose, meaning in some company that also has a social good to it. Patagonia is a wonderful example, right? That's the creme de la creme of a company that does everything the right way, as best they can. This is going to shock you, but there is going to be about $10 to $30 trillion passed down to the next generation in the next 20 years, maybe 10 years. Trillion. trillion dollars. And these are the millennials that are saying they want to invest with purpose. That is a ton of money, and that is all impact investing. So what do we need to do as Georgia? We got to come up with opportunities, deal flow, companies that can address these challenges in an innovative way. We have to break down the silos at which we look, and we have to be more generalist and bring people that can think and connect the dots here while taking advantage of specialists to do it in a focused and specific way. And there's all kinds of examples of these out there with education technology companies, AI on the healthcare side, new financial structuring approaches with insurance. There's some really cool fintech companies that are automating everything that have incredible efficiencies, but could you license that and apply it to healthcare insurance or providing low interest loans for transportation, whatever it may be. But that's what I mean by impact investing. That's what I mean by multidisciplinary solutions to your question. Is like, how are we going to do this as a generation to address these challenges? It's just not sustainable. Was it a 10 of hearts? No. Sea lion? You wouldn't lie to me? Shoot. All right. So here's some quick lessons I learned from college and public service. So I'm one of these guys that's just way, way overcommitted. But given that you guys are mostly grad students and undergrads, some of my best learnings are actually in college, but it's interesting, I actually don't remember much, if anything, of the actual classes that I took. Everything I remember had to do with mentors and relationships. There's a guy named John Gardner. How many people have heard of John Gardner? I wouldn't have heard of him except he knew my grandfather, and he served as my mentor, and I go have lunch with him probably quarterly, and we just talk, and he just asked me how I was doing, and how was life at the fraternity, and who my friends were, and how Stanford athletics did. I'd ask some questions back and forth, but, I sort of treated him as, here's my grandfather, maybe we can play gin or something and, hang out. I had no clue who he was and what a missed opportunity it was to actually talk to him about stuff. What's very interesting is I came up and realized he gave the 100th commencement address to Stanford in 1999, I think it was, or maybe a little bit earlier than that. And someone had written an article about it in the New York Times, and then I started reading it, and this was about 5 years ago. And it was just chock full of wisdom. And I suggest all of you guys look it up and read it, because it was catered for people your age. But he was talking about what's going to happen when you get to my age, and what you learn in life, what's the importance of life. Things like stay interested. That was his big lesson. Doesn't matter what you do, where you go, stay interested. You guys are all really smart people. You're all driven people. You wouldn't be here if you're not. You're going to be competitive. You're trying to reach the top. But he puts wonderful perspective on what the top means, right? And you don't understand it till you actually go through it. But having been there, I can look back and like, wow, he's actually speaking to me exactly. So I say that is that I wish I could go back and ask him 1,000 questions right now. Now, granted, those questions I wouldn't know what to ask except for what I've gone through in life. So you have to do it trial by fire, which is one of his points he makes. But spend the time now to get to find mentors and build relationships with your classmates, and do that proactively and as aggressively as you can. It'll pay off dividends. One example, I was doing my honors thesis on NATO expansion, pretty dull subject. How many people know about the 1995 decision to expand NATO? It happened. It was a big decision at the time. Nowadays, with Brexit, who knows? Talk about change. I was getting texts from all my friends from business school today being like, reunions in a month, and I might not be able to get through France. I'm trying to apply for French citizenship now because Brexit has just changed everything. It's completely changed the game, and people don't know what to do necessarily, and they're not prepared for it. One example is to do this paper, I was meeting with William Perry, who was the Secretary of stayed under Clinton, and very active into this decision, Secretary of Defense, and very active in this decision. And he opposed it in a lot of ways because he thought it should go another approach. And so I was a confident little undergrad, and so I pushed him on it a little bit. It was like, well, if you opposed it, why did you let him do it? And, questioning like that. Didn't you want to try one more time? And he stopped me, after I had questioned him, and he had politely responded like 3 times for the same question. And he said, John, I get it, but you have to understand, when you are working on a team or working under someone, you have to put your best argument forward why to make a decision. If he ultimately disagrees with it, you have 2 choices. You can either say, yes, sir, Mr. President, I understand, and I respectfully will follow that guidance and do whatever I can to make it a success going forward. He said, if you don't get that buy-in right there, if that's your decision, then leave. And then the second decision is leave because it compromises your values in such a way that you could not be effective as a team member. And I remember this vividly, and it's one of the few things that I just remember so starkly because it's applied to every other thing I've done in life. And it's going to apply to you guys as you go into companies and trying to figure out your own value system and your own shared values and decisions that you make with teams. Teamwork is incredibly important, and I think building trust is the first part of being an effective team. The reason you want trust is to have, be able to have conversations that have conflict in them. Why do you want conflict in your conversations?
You don't want to just do what one person says. You want to have a variety of inputs to make the best decision.
Diversity of thought. Yep, and that's right. The more people you have, the better decisions you make. And in business school, I did this, learned about the wisdom of the crowds. Look it up. It's amazing. If you took all of you in a room, you put certain criteria, like you couldn't talk to each other or bias each other in the decisions, etc. Collectively, you would always make a better decision than individually. And it goes down to how many M&Ms are in this jar. Any decision. It's quite amazing. That's effective teams. And so this is an important lesson as well that I've learned over the years for collaboration, for teamwork, for anything you're in. If you don't agree with the decision, don't sabotage it. You have to buy in, and if you don't buy in, you have to say something. It's harder as you're younger, but the older you get and you start managing your own teams, you'll realize why this is so important, and I can talk about all kinds of failures that I've done to be able to learn that. Live, do, and learn. At this age, say yes to everything. Grades are important, but they're not that important. Say yes. Live, learn what you want to do. None of you guys know what you want to do yet. How are you going to learn what you do unless you're actually taking advantage of opportunities and testing things out? So say yes to everything and do it. Law school, I can talk about leadership, and maybe we'll come back to that. But I was in charge of student government, and it was the first time in my life where I got negative pushback. And put yourself out there, you're well-intentioned, you want to support everybody, and it was a very competitive environment, and even though they're friendly, you got a lot of pushback, and that was an interesting moment in my life, which if you guys are interested, I'm happy to talk about too. One of the challenges I've had is being stretched too thin. So I'm probably on 5 or 6 nonprofit boards, active in the foundation, have my investment company. I'm running the startup, which I'm going to talk about in a second, with all these different approaches. And so one of the issues I've had is just pure bandwidth, right? How can I do all of these things that I'm interested? I get all of my energy from other people, from learning about these issues. If I sit in a room in any nonprofit I'm on board with, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. I want to do this the rest of my life. The next day I get another one, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. We're going to save these people. It's going to be great. And it's a tough position. I mean, how many of you guys feel like that too? Like, especially in this environment with the rich faculty and what you're learning on a day-to-day basis. It is really, really, really hard. So, in order to manage this, I've learned to innovate and to adapt and to come up with more and more solutions to figure this out. For every challenge, you just have to keep creating and play to your strengths. For instance, How many people would believe that I cloned myself? If I could be 2 places at once, I could get a lot more done. Stand up. I also learned how to teleport things. And I'm going to teleport this card to out here. And my clone is going to come in and give it to you. He's still a clone. He's still a clone.
The original John Hardman.
Was it the right card?
Yeah.
Well done. So the truth is, I am terrible, terrible at magic, but I am good enough to learn one trick. And if I can do that with the trick, then I can make it a really, really good trick by adapting, innovating, and playing to my strength. The fact that I was born with a clone who actually is one of the reasons that I am the way I am, the values that I have, and have empathy and share everything and, you know, whatever it may be. This is Hill, by the way. So, how many people are ready to get onto Wild Arc? Johnny in the back was. Does everybody know Johnny? So, for those of you interested in impact investing, which, as I just said, is the future, and you should be, you need to meet Johnny, for one, who does the day-to-day work with GSIC, which is an organization here in town trying to build the impact investing ecosystem. And Sydney. Does everybody know Sydney? Sydney's my colleague, and she actually does everything. I actually don't do anything anymore, and so she deserves a lot of that credit. So, a mission to protect the wild. After I ran this impact investing fund, I got into operational experience. I learned a lot. I was running my own advisory investment company, and Trump got elected. And in my advisory investment company, I was looking at things in Georgia that I could do. From a fund perspective, you know, did I want to tackle conservation here or new agricultural fund, given the opportunities in Georgia being an agriculture state? I just told you about the economy, and a lot of that is agriculture based. Could we create a fund around affordable housing? Could we create a fund investing in startups and technology, fintech, or some others? And I met up with my buddy from business school just for a beer, and he told me about Wild Arc. Another key thing to know and why you should spend time with people here is relationships as you get older become increasingly important. You've all heard it, it's who you know, not what you know. But it's who you know and the relationship you have with them and their trust in you as someone with integrity that is very, very important. And there's various elements of trust, and I can go into the importance of trust and how you create a big team as well. But he told me about what he was thinking about doing. And at the venture capital fund I ran, it was a seed fund, meaning we were investing small amounts of money in startups, all social enterprises, so all with a social mission, and on 5 different continents around the world. So I have been investing on 5 different continents. We invested in about 30 companies over 2 years. We created this program called Village Capital, which is really cool. Look it up. And so I had a background in impact investing. And he told me what he was doing. He was trying to save the wild, essentially. He wanted to save all of the animals and species. How many people have heard of the 6th extinction? So we're in a crisis right now where we're losing species at an unprecedented rate all over the world. And his vision is he wanted to find a way to figure out how he could live to be a grandfather and have his grandchild see lions in the wild. And he had found himself in a position, he traveled for 20 years around the world running a travel company, and just fell in love with nature and found himself in a position where he wanted to do something to help. I was at a position where I was tired of this polarized world in which we live. How many people are tired of this polarized world in which we live? Me too. I mean, I don't care what side you're on, politics or not. You know, I think it's actually really sad that we can't even talk to each other and work out differences in a collaborative way. And one of the things I feel strongly about, and what I want to focus on in the next part of my life, is how do we come up with more collaborative approaches, more multidisciplinary approaches to be more effective at what we're doing, create efficiencies across the board. I think where we're headed as a society here in the United States and elsewhere is extremely, extremely dangerous, because it's very fragile and you never know what could happen at any one time. So what I loved about conservation work is it's actually nonpartisan. People on the far left and the far right in the United States actually give equal amounts of money and equal amounts of support for conservation work. Some do it for environmental reasons, some do it for recreational reasons, you know, you can say, but they both believe in it. And so it was a nonpartisan issue I cared about, but I also was trying to reflect personally what made me happiest and where did I want to focus my time. I'm happiest in nature, and I also think, to your question, protecting the planet is going to be your greatest challenge. The baby boomers basically ruined it for us, but particularly for you guys. You know, the planet is in dire, dire straits, and it's going to affect all of us in unprecedented ways that we don't know, whether you believe in climate change or not. Here's a fun little thing that you guys might like.
Do you find yourself longing for the apocalypse? I did. I was looking for a reason to live. Hi. Are you feeling tired, irritable, stressed out? Well, you might consider nature.
From the people that recommend getting outside comes prescription-strength Nature, a non-harmful medication shown to relieve the crippling symptoms of modern life.
Nature's recommended for humans of all ages, and it's great for pets, too.
Nature can reduce cynicism, meaninglessness, anal retentiveness, and murderous rage. In clinical studies, Nature is proven to decrease work-induced catatonia.
Caution. Nature may cause you to slow down, quit your job, or seriously consider what you're doing here tonight.
Overly cynical, jaded, or emotionally numb, you may need to increase your dose of Nature. Do you have trouble being even mildly uncomfortable? Nature may not be right for you. Side effects may include spontaneous euphoria, taking yourself less seriously, and being in a good mood for no apparent reason.
So ask your doctor if nature is right for you.
So that's good humor, right? But it's also very, very true. For mental healthness, depression, anxiety, all the things that are increasing as a society, getting out to nature is proven to statistically work. And we don't need all of these other drugs to solve our problems. We just need nature. The problem is it's decreasing. It's harder to get out to pure nature spots. We're the world on the brink in the last 50 years alone. 50% of the world's individual species, 8% of the world's biodiversity, and 45% of the world's forests have been lost, which is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. 96% of the mammals on Earth today are humans or mammals that are bred just to feed humans, meaning there are only 4% of the world's mammals left in the wild. Over 40% of the world's land is now agriculture land. And so you think about agriculture land, that's great because we got to feed this growing population, but then where do these animals live? And then we can get into ecosystem services. The ecosystem service value to the United States is worth $100 trillion, meaning where do we get our clean water from? Where do we get our clean air from? You know, the balance of ecosystems within these species. You know, bees are pollinators. Everybody knows that we're losing bees. a lot, but they're incredibly important to pollinate all the other things that make the ecosystem balanced and work and clean our air, clean our soils, capture carbon, etc. Funny cartoon. So our mission is to promote and support activities that educate, enable, provide resources, or inspire humanity to sustainably conserve, protect, restore the world's ecosystems. Essentially, we want to take a multidisciplinary approach and remove the silos in conservation field. Lots of money has been going into conservation over the last 50 years, but we haven't been able to change the trend of species extinction going down. So how do we do that? We do it through protecting space, scientific research, supporting other local conservation organizations, and primarily storytelling. Like that video, we want to engage the general public in this. We have to simplify it for them, make it something that they'll understand, but also something that's engaging where they want to get out and help and support it and recognize the benefit of it. I'm not sure we're going to have time to show this video, but everybody look up, take a note. This is a really, really cool video. Look up how the wolves changed Yellowstone, how the wolves changed the rivers. It's an awesome video, but it basically says by reintroducing the wolves into Yellowstone, it changed the entire ecosystem and put it back in balance. They started eating the deer, which had to move away from the rivers, and so all the erosion that was occurring because they were eating all the plants started coming back, and then the coyotes came, the rabbits came, the mice came, which brought back the birds because they had something to eat. It's really, really cool. But our strategy is very similar in the sense everybody loves charismatic species. Who loves lions, bears, tigers, pandas, wolves? They're everything in our society from the first day we were born. The challenge in conservation is they've been effective to raise money for, but a lot of times we have to protect these other ecosystems that have all of this other biodiversity. We need to protect the frogs and the dung beetles, the bees that make these ecosystems work in harmony and in balance. So we funded research to say if we protected the top 100 of these species, how much of the world's biodiversity would fit within their ranges. So think of the wolf going in and protecting these balances, these ecosystems. How much of it? It turns out that on 100 of these animals on 50 sites of the world essentially provide 89% biodiversity benefits, which is absolutely crazy. If you look at the trends, lots more protected area in the world, but we're not protecting the animals themselves and the ecosystems themselves because of agricultural reasons or poaching reasons or other livelihood reasons, cutting down the trees, deforestation, whatever it may be. So that's our solution is let's make it simple for the rest of the world. Protect them and they'll protect the rest. And here's a map what we're doing. As far as space, we've started 4 conservancies. The first conservancy was in South Africa. We bought 5,000 acres to Kruger National Park. How many people have heard of Kruger? It's a big public park that has all these wildlife species. So we bought 5,000 acres, dropped fence, and extended the corridors by 5,000 acres. What's super, super interesting is once those fences dropped, the property value went up because we could do day drives. And all of a sudden, you can create economic opportunities for the locals that are living there through ecotourism and whatnot. Grizzly Plains, we have a partnership with a Native American community in Alaska, trying to have, how many people have heard of Pebble Mine? Pebble is the largest gold and copper mine ever found. Problem is it sits right next to the very last sockeye salmon spawning area. Salmon there are important because it feeds the entire ecosystem. All the bears, all the wolves, all the eagles, everything else that goes through there. Salmon are also incredibly sensitive to copper. So if any copper gets into the river, the likelihood that the population gets decimated is really, really strong. And you lose not only our food that we're eating, and salmon get the ships and the economic vitality of the region for these locals, you also lose potentially the entire ecosystem and the food chain. So we've supported this community to buy up land that protected it. We're working with them to try to protect their whole 66,000 acres there. There's a video, go onto our YouTube site. How many of our people are on Instagram? If you like the magic trick, follow us. But you can see all these pictures and all these videos and things that we're doing. A lot of our mission is how do you create a lifestyle brand around the wild? How do you make it fun? How do you make it engaging? And these videos try to do that. The coolest project that we have is in Papua New Guinea, where we have paid for all the kids in a local village to go to school in exchange for them not leasing their land to a logging company. Now, so it's awesome. So New Britain is an 8 million acre island off of Papua New Guinea. It is untouched, unexplored rainforest. We don't know what's up there. So as the cliche goes, the cure to cancer is in these hills, right? We think when we went up there in October, we may have found a new bat species already, but the loggers are getting dangerously close to this area. There's about 1 million acres in the mountain range, which goes along this spine, that is still protected, but they're building roads up aggressively to try to clear cut. The 7 million acres in the lowlands has already been converted to palm oil, so it's already been effectively lost, and now why they're trying to get to the timber in the highlands. So it's very interesting in talking about multidisciplinary approaches. Protecting this rainforest actually has nothing to do with the rainforest. It's about protecting and empowering the villagers there.
What makes you think the loggers won't use violence or still penetrate that area?
Good question. When I was there sleeping on the ground in a tent and heard people walking by my tent every night, I was thinking the same thing. We don't know. What we do know is that the legal issues are very complicated in Papua New Guinea. Government owns part and the local villagers loan part, and it's established. For instance, in working out our agreement, we got a contract signed, and this was our contract. They gave me this and basically said, this means we're solid. Good as oak, right? This is our contract of an agreement. And if I had more time, I'd talk to you about building trust with this community. It took 3 years just for them to invite us in. The learnings I had early on in life and the Carter Center's approach and what I learned from my dad about working with local villages, teaching people how to fish, not giving them the fish, only going places where you're invited and where there's trusted. Otherwise, you work to build that relationship up to make a difference. These are all things that we're doing. But you realize in protecting this rainforest, we have to protect this village. And what's interesting, particularly around violence, people get corrupted. But neighboring villages did work out deals with the loggers. And they came to us when we were there and basically said, hey, how do we get out of these contracts? We're starting to realize that all we're getting is paid pennies. They lease us back or provide us loans to buy products, rice or whatever it be. We use it and then we're in debt. And then at the same time, we're going to lose our forest, which is all we have. And that provides all of our livelihoods. So they're starting to see it. So educating the community is important. And then if they all do it together, then it becomes harder. I think transparency is important as well. The more we're involved providing transparency about what's going on, who's there. There's a lot of money that's been given to Papua New Guinea to protect it. And it's one of the most dangerous places in the world without question. But there's a really high incentive to protect it. And so the more that we can do to educate, and let it be led from the villagers saying that this is what we want as opposed to what we want, then the better off we'll be. But it is dangerous, so we don't have any guarantees. But so what we're doing now, it's supporting education, but it's also supporting healthcare. We went on a 3-day trek just to get to this village. And if you go to the website, there's a cool video of it to see how hard it is. But think about mothers there that have no doctor. They're living in huts. They have no electricity. And they have to make this 3-day hike when they go into labor just to get medical assistance if they need it. The stories are chilling about, moms losing babies along the way or dying themselves, particularly in the rainy season where there's all kinds of flash floods and they get washed away. So we want to help them on that front. We want to help them with just regular medical care as well. How much time we got? Are we out?
We're kind of at time. So if you want to...
Yeah. Sure. We're also creating a sustainable product marketplace, which is a whole nother thing. Stats are amazing. Revenue is possible. Travel is now worth more than 10% of the world's GDP indirectly. People want to travel with purpose. It's a huge business opportunity. How do you link that travel and proceeds going back to this conservation work? We're doing productions. So we film everything we do, and we're working with networks to try to sell our productions and see it, and also have an additional revenue source that comes back to us. So I'll end there. If you want to stay, I'll play one of the videos, and you can stay and watch it. If you want to leave, you can, and then I'll be around to answer any questions that I want. All right, thank you.